Now, nobody knew that at the time in the early 60s. There's always a secret genius at work behind the scenes somewhere who's undiscovered, and that was certainly Jeep Harnett. And their relationship between Jeep and Mac built the studio and built the studio and built the studio. And in 1965, Henry Stone, maybe not, brought down James Brown to record. Now, here's the thing about James Brown. James Brown in 1956 had a hit, Please, Please, Please. Biggest hit in the R&B market, which then became soul music. There's Ray Charles, Jackie Wilson, Sam Cooke, James Brown, the big four soul artists. No others. These guys invented it. He recorded Please, Please, Please. His stage show becomes notorious. It fades for a while. However, in 65, when he comes to Criteria and records on Mac Emmerman and Jeep Harnett's boards, he records what we call I Feel Good. It's called I Still Got You, but we call it I Feel Good. Massive hit. Becomes a beacon for soul music, what was once called R&B. And this really focuses on Miami. Miami is now a recording place. Peggy Lee couldn't get recorded here. The truth is, when Mac Emmerman recorded on a portable thing and they tried to figure out how to work it out, she had to go home back to LA. Well, I shouldn't say home, but she went to Capitol Records, and Capitol Records re-recorded the album and released it as live in Miami. That wasn't true. It was never actually recorded in Miami. It was recorded in Capitol out in LA. So this changes everything. Miami is now a recording central. And Henry Stone, being a distributor, he was a hobbyist at recording. He had an Ampex tape machine in his back office. I don't know if that's a studio. I don't think most people consider that a studio. So he recorded Ray Charles. Ray Charles came to town early, before Ray Charles was known. Well before his hits in the late 50s. Back, I think in 51 he recorded. And Henry recorded Four Sides and released St. Pete Blues, and in moderate success, nothing big. But it was truly Jeep Harnett that put the city on the national map as a recording center. Now, this should have been a cottage industry. It should have been small. What changes everything is something that happened that none of us could have predicted. Our solar system of a music industry was formed when the independent R&B label, Atlantic Records, been in business since the late 40s, been a hit maker since Drinking Wine Spodioti, I believe in 1948. 20 years, massive success, major indies, we say. Well, the owner, who's a saint, Ahmet Ertegun, son of a Turkish immigrant, takes a deal by Warner Brothers. I will sell. Jerry Wexler, one of the men involved in creating the term R&B, rhythm and blues, R&B, a partner of the label, was a little reluctant to sell, but Ahmet owned the majority of the shares and it was sold. What do? They take the money, pocket it, move to Miami, record out of Criteria, and continue to run Atlantic Records. And that sets up the star that we all revolve around. Everyone in Miami in the music industry revolves around, or did revolve around, Atlantic Records. It happened in 1967. A couple years later, their engineer, Tom Dowd, who was so much of a genius, he helped invent the atomic bomb. He continued to record when Robert Stigwood of RSL Records from the UK brought his groups down to record. And that included Eric Clapton, and that included the Bee Gees. Layla was recorded in Criteria Studios. One of the biggest hits of 20th century music was recorded in Criteria by Tom Dowd on the Atlantic bill. Atlantic was the distributor of RSO. So at this point, Miami becomes a focus. We all should be going down to Miami to record. We all should follow their recording techniques. The genius that helped the atomic bomb recorded Layla, one of the biggest hits of the decades, if not our lifetimes. So this becomes something more than notable, more than something to focus on. It becomes what we gravitate towards. Henry Stone is still the biggest cog in the industry as a distributor, now known as the Tone Distribution. He's distributing independent labels while recording. And one of his, I guess you could say, artists, underlings. I don't think either of those terms are fair. But Terry Kane was a guy who helped build the studio out of old recycled NASA parts. Built what becomes known as Henry Stone Studio. And they threw Terry Kane a bone for building that. Here you go, you can have your own label. TK Records. And Terry Kane puts out some novelty, pseudo X-rated, R-rated record, and they don't market it and it dies. That's not the story of TK, even though TK comes from that. The story of TK is when Henry Stone hires Steve Alamo, a blue-eyed soul singer, to start running a label, which they label Alston. All for Alamo, Stone for Stone. Alston Records. Alston Records partners up with Deep City, which is a record store turned record label, ran by a guy named Willie Clark and his partner. They discover a genius songwriter named Clarence Reed. Clarence Reed can just pop out a song with no effort. This is in the late 60s. Clarence Reed can discover talent just by looking at them. Clarence Reed doesn't want money. Clarence Reed doesn't want fame. I mean, not to say he doesn't, but he's not chasing it. He's creative. He's a creative man doing creative things. And ultimately, he finds Betty Wright, 16 years old. And Betty Wright and Clarence Reed start writing hit songs. And Alston Records says, we've got something on our hands because they keep coming through us. Now, you may know the song Cleanup Woman, sampled many times over. This was that collaboration. Henry Stone being the giant planet in the solar system, funding Steve Alamo, discovering Deep City, fostering Clarence Reed, discovering Betty Wright. Beautiful relationship. But they always know Atlantic is the game in town. And if we need major worldwide distribution, you take your record to Atlantic and they'll put it into the system if they think it's good enough.